Hi, I'm Rob Penczak.
And I'm Rick Wingrove, and this is Road to Reason. Today we're going to be talking about prayer. Rob, would you like to lead us off with an opening prayer?
Well, I don't do a whole lot of praying, but give it a whirl here. If everybody could just bow their heads with me. And when thou prayest, thou shalt not be as the hypocrites are, for they love to pray standing in the synagogues and in the corners of the streets, that they may be seen of men. Verily I say unto you, they have their reward. But thou, when thou prayest, enter into thy closet, and when thou shalt, see, this is why I don't pray much. And when thou hast shut thy door, pray to thy Father which is in secret, and thy Father which seeth in secret shall reward thee openly. Amen.
So that's a big thumbs down on public prayer.
Definitely a thumbs down on public prayer, unless you rehearse it a little better than I did.
Ambrose Bierce, 150 years ago in the Devil's Dictionary, told us that to pray is to ask that the laws of the universe be annulled on behalf of a single petitioner confessedly unworthy. What we know is that prayer is a way to get credit for doing something without actually doing anything. So prayer, when we see people praying in public, they're doing what's known as horizontal prayer. Vertical prayer is when you take it upstairs. You go straight to the man, you want to ask him for something specific, something concrete, and you expect results, kind of like Tim Tebow does. But horizontal prayer is political. It's a way of telling everybody around you just how religious you are, what a great Christian you are. So that brings us, to the National Day of Prayer, which just happened. Any thoughts about that?
Well, much like you, I think that this whole prayer thing, that having it on the first Thursday of every May is just stupid. Because, like you probably know, God mostly listens here in America on Sundays, unless you're Jewish like me, or in Israel, have dual citizenship, in which you can pray on Saturdays. Or if you're Muslim, then you get a really sweet deal where 5 times a week, God will check the prayer line to see what you have to say. But I've been starting to wonder if this whole group pushing this, because this isn't just people that are religious, everybody's allowed to go out there and pray. But this is a Christian right group that really wants to make sure it's a national government-sanctioned event. And I'm starting to wonder, since they want this on Thursday, which is Thor's Day, of course,
right,
if these are maybe just a group of Norse pagans and not really the Christian fundamentalists that we believe. So that's my take on why I don't want it on Thursdays.
Right. So in Leesburg, what we've encountered out there, there's some history for us out there with the not just the National Day of Prayer, but going back all the way to the Christmas displays on the lawn. So they're kind of doubling down in Loudoun County, Virginia, on prayer at the courthouse. Ken Cuccinelli, our Attorney General, got involved in this and basically said it's okay to do whatever you want. You just got to, make some accommodations to other groups. But they clearly have, they're getting a clear endorsement from the government. They are allowed on the lawn. They get to leave their Christmas displays up unattended, whereas the atheist groups specifically don't get to do that. But what they're doing now, they've been holding a Bible reading marathon on the lawn. And can you roll that clip from YouTube? Hi, Ryan. So tell me, why do you have to do this on government property?
It's all right.
I'm sorry?
It's all right. Our laws are based upon the Bible. Remember that.
I'm sorry?
Our laws are based upon the Bible.
That is absolutely false. Our laws are based on English common law. There are no biblical provisions in any of our laws anywhere, in any state in the Union or in the United States Federal Code.
I disagree with you.
Well, you're wrong. Show me one.
The 10 Commandments are there.
I'm sorry?
The 10 Commandments?
What are the 10 Commandments?
You shall not have any gods before you, do not lie or steal, keep the Sabbath, etc., etc.
Well, that's 3 of 10. Can you name the other 7?
Why?
I can.
Okay, good. But what's more important is this is the Word of God that brings life to people's souls.
Human beings wrote this thousands of years ago based on ignorance and superstition. So it's
inspired by God.
So not really written by God. It was people claiming to be saying the words of God.
Have you ever read the Bible?
I've read it through and through. Okay. I attended Vacation Bible School for several years when I was a kid. I attended a Southern Baptist church for about 10 years or more.
Amen.
So yeah, I've read it.
Good.
I also know that the Ten Commandments have nothing whatsoever to do with our law. There are two of them, don't steal and don't kill, which are humanist values.
Every civilization has a summary of the law. Yeah.
That's right. Those are humanist values. They're independent of religion, and they affect directly humans, and have nothing, and are independent of religion. They've preceded, those provisions predated the Ten Commandments by thousands of years, and are practiced universally as humanist principles.
That exemplifies that there's a universal God.
No. That means the humanism is the universal there, because the God changes. There is no universal God. There's 2,000 gods. How many of those 2,000 gods do you believe in?
I accept the Lord God Almighty, maker of heaven and earth.
So how many gods do you believe in?
I accept Jesus Christ, our Lord and Savior, the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit.
So one God? So out of the 2,000, you believe in one. Out of the 2,000, I believe in zero. You're almost exactly as much of an atheist as I am. You believe in Thor? So you're kind of an atheist about Thor. So you're really mostly an atheist.
No, I said there's a universal God who made everything.
But I pointed out there's 2,000 gods worshipped on this planet.
There's probably more than that, but anyway.
Yeah, there have been, some people say 5,000. I just, pick a few thousand random.
Well, anyway.
You getting any pushback?
So are you doing well today?
I'm doing well. I still don't understand why you have to do this on government property.
Well, any property is God's property.
That's not true.
It's not so true.
That's just your opinion based on a book that was written 2,000 years ago, which doesn't actually say that. That's not in the Bible, what you just said.
It says all authority is given to Jesus Christ, our Lord and Savior. Yes.
It doesn't say all property. And by the way, that is not the law of the United States of America.
Why not?
Because we're a secular nation. We have a constitution, a secular constitution, and it doesn't say that. Okay, that was right outside right in front of the Bible reading marathon that was going on in Loudoun County, right on the courthouse grounds. And that guy, I almost felt a little sorry for him. He was just spouting the standard misinformation. And basically, this is their way of disregarding, disrespecting, and denying separation of church and state. They hold this every year, and now they've started doing a prayer meeting. They follow this up by holding a prayer meeting in government facilities in the Board of Supervisors chamber in Loudoun County. So they're basically just saying they will not be bound by separation of church and state, and they just deny it. I asked another guy there about separation of church and state. He says, well, those words aren't in the Constitution. I said, well, neither is the word democracy or capitalism. So let's play that game for a while. But this thing is going on, and a clue is that this is being put on by a group called Performing Arts Ministries. So their purpose is not just to read the Bible. You can do that in a church anywhere. Their purpose is to read the Bible on government property so that they can blur that line, so that they can deny separation of church and state and make it a normal thing to have religious services in government facilities and just continue to blur the line.
One of the things I'd point out is it's not just putting any religion in there. They try to float this notion that we're not compelling anybody to do this. It's non-compulsory, therefore it's not a violation of church and state separation. But you don't see them having a Quran reading marathon or a Torah marathon or the Hindu Vedas or the Book of Mormon. This is being pushed by a Christian right group, unless, like I mentioned, and I was glad that you brought up Thor there, if you believe in him. So this is either being led by the Norse pagans that want this on a Thursday and never on a Sunday. It specifically says in the statute any day but Sunday can be the day of prayer. So I thought that was funny that you had Thor in there.
And you're right. This is a handout to the Christian community. And the Muslim community, for instance, perhaps we should just alert them to the possibility of holding something on government property, and
Right, remember
see how that goes over.
Remember the religious tolerance that was shown when there was talk about a mosque or a museum to the Muslims at ground zero, and that all of a sudden was heresy and terrible, and that's going to be encouraging the terrorists that did this as if all the Muslims were responsible. But then when they find a pair of crossbeams that resemble the cross, suddenly the cross is no longer a religious symbol, it's purely secular, and anybody that's against that isn't very patriotic.
Right, which is one of the most bizarre interpretations of law I've ever heard. This obvious symbol for Christianity, the most obvious religious symbol on the planet, recognized universally by everybody, suddenly becomes a secular symbol. And by the way, who was pushing this cross at the World Trade Center? It was the Catholic Archdiocese of New York. So it's their symbol, and it's the same guys pushing it. It's the Catholic Church pushing it, and it's secular. So it defies logic. Yeah,
we're going to get to another great court ruling, that tests the bounds of imagination in a little while, but we'll get to that when it comes up.
Right. You had something about the history of the National Day of Prayer.
Yeah.
Or did you have something else first?
Yeah. No, I think it's important, just to go over the history a little bit, and for us to understand that this isn't just regular old people that happen to be religious that really feel infringed upon by our current setup, and so they need a National Day of Prayer. Anybody at any time is welcome to go out to pray to whoever they want. That's the laws. That's part of the beauty of separation of church and state. The government's not out there telling you, oh, you're a Muslim, you can't pray, you're a Jew, you can't pray, you're a Christian, you can't pray. And if you remember, the Catholics and Protestants have not always gotten along very well, and this whole separation of church and state really flowed from all of the nastiness between religions that was very active until we separated the two.
Right. The founders, with a clean sheet of paper, they saw what happened in Europe. They had all of history wide open to them. And with a clean sheet of paper, they said, we're just not going to do that here. Let's make a government where everybody gets equal treatment regardless of religious opinion.
And Madison, James Madison, I don't think we're going to get to it today. I don't have all the details down, but he goes through in real clear detail where it's not an accident that our separate church and state are really they try to keep them apart. And anybody that wants to inform themselves of that can go read it really easily.
Well, right. James Madison wrote a paper which I never heard of until I was a grown-up. It's probably the most important historical paper that you never heard of. It's called Memorial and Remonstrance, or Remonstrance, I guess is how you pronounce it. And it is James Madison explaining why we need separation of church and state, and why theocracy is just a bad idea, and it has to do with history.
Right. And some of the language they've put in there, it just makes it very clear that they're dividing it as far as they humanly can. I forgot his exact wording, but that as much as words can make clear, that's what he wants to put into their, our founding documents, so that nobody 100 or 200 years later can come and pretend that we were founded as a Christian nation. But let's go into just kind of the history of how the National Day of Prayer came about. It was in 1952, and I want to thank, I don't know his whole name, his YouTube handle is Prof. MTH Mitch, and so thank you you have a couple of YouTube videos that give lots and lots of details on this for anybody that wants to go look it up, and we'll post that link on our website and YouTube and Facebook later. Okay. But in 1952, the evangelist Billy Graham went on a 6-week tour of Washington, having a religious campaign trying to push for this National Day of Prayer. And he was, said that our nation was founded upon God, religion, and the church, which it wasn't, and that we've dropped our pilot, the Lord Jesus Christ, just in case you really think that this is any old religion. This is very specific, this is about Christ, and that we're sailing blindly without our compass. So after calling for a day of prayer, Pat Robertson's daddy, as it turns out, Absalom, who was a segregationist, introduced the requested legislation in the Senate. So he said that the corrosive forces of communism, which seek simultaneously to destroy our democratic way of life and the faith in our Almighty God, is going to be the basis for this. Another thing Mitch pointed out is, you show me the God that's pushing for democracy instead of theocracy, he'd like to see that. Shortly after that, after 1952, we had In God We Trust placed onto the money, and then Under God placed into the Pledge of Allegiance. And again, these were being pushed by people that really bought into atheists or communists were fighting the Cold War, and they really tried to make that link between the two of them.
Right. They literally changed the motto of the United States from the one the founders gave us to a religious special interest group.
Right. So
and converted the Pledge of Allegiance to a religious oath.
Right, and so when people say, well, I'm a conservative, I want to go back to our founders, they're not going back to the founders, they're going back to what some segregationists and what some people on the far religious right inserted in well after our founders. If we jump from the 50s to 1988, another segregationist, Strom Thurmond, introduced something to change the wording a little bit so that it would be the first Thursday in May would be the National Day of Prayer, and this way they could schedule things more easily and it would always be at the same time. Sometime after that, I guess we should move on to, oh, and by the way, James Dobson's wife, Shirley Dobson, just so we understand that this isn't just the regular old person who needs the special day. This is the religious right. James Dobson's wife is one of the big founders of this. A bunch of people from the Arch Right are involved in this. Some years after that, Rob Barker, who we're going to be lucky enough to have on in a couple of weeks.
Rob Boston.
Rob Boston, I'm sorry, thank you. Rob Boston on the 19th. That they brought a suit against, saying that this was unconstitutional. And a federal judge, Barbara Crabb, goes through in very thorough detail. She said, you're right, this is unconstitutional, and they threw it out that you cannot require legislation. This is breaking the Establishment Clause. And so we had like a breath there of sensibility. That was one of the good rulings. Shortly after that, she was overturned, not because anything she did was wrong, but they said that Boston didn't have standing to make this case. So it was completely unconstitutional, but on a technicality, and worse than that, they're saying nobody can ever challenge the Establishment Clause if they
right. That's the other dodge. It's either, well, they'll just say you have no standing. It's either secular or you're not the person who has standing. What I don't understand is why every citizen of the United States doesn't have standing when it comes to a constitutional issue, especially an atheist in a case like this would have to have standing. But they just say it, and that's the law.
Right, and that's, this is why politics and religion shouldn't mix. When you get a bunch of people from the religious right kind of infiltrating the system, getting folks like George Bush elected, letting him then, stock the judiciary with evangelical judges, suddenly you'll get these bizarre things. And, the law is the law, and if the judge says something, the best you can do is appeal it. And if you go up to the Supreme Court and you've got, Scalia is going to make the decision, what kind of hope do we have to get an actual interpretation of the law as opposed to his Christian interpretation of how he'd like the world to be?
Right. So, and the people who push the National Day of Prayer, they've been getting away with that for a long time now. And only in the last few years, once the atheist movement just started mushrooming in popularity and acceptance, are they getting some pushback? And it's groups, not just us, but groups like us all over the U.S. are confronting them about it. Just like when we went down to the courthouse the other day and confronted them and try to make the point of why are you doing this on government property?
I noticed you never answered that very specific and simple question. You never got an answer for that.
No, and I got about 40 more minutes with a couple or three other people the next day, and still they could not answer that question. Their basic message is just because we can, we're gonna, deal with it. And, it begs the question, well, they are getting pushback now, and by the way, just this last week, what's his name? The nominee, Obama's nominee for the Transportation Department, something Fox, I forget his name, declared Thursday to be a National Day of Reason. Okay, when I hear that, I got to think somebody's an atheist when I hear that.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see if there's any pushback from the right, because clearly they don't want reason or logic, being welcomed into the United States and into politics. And
well, some right-wing religious women's group has already said it's things like that he said about National Day of Reason are the kind of things that led to the Holocaust. Now that might be a bit over the top. That might be overstating just a bit, but that's the kind of pushback we get.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd like to mention we had Sean Faircloth on last week, and one of the points he makes in his book, Attack of the Theocrats, is that all the legislation we pass, that kind of embodies society's morality. These are really moral rules we're making. So when you have the chief of police in Leesburg, he wants he put out a bunch of prayer requests as part of this marathon week. And instead of actually enacting legislation, he wants people to go pray for it. So the way that Rick Perry would have everybody go pray for rain because of the drought, instead of addressing global warming and addressing all these polluters are doing and putting legislation in place to minimize that, he just wants to pray for this. For, Chief Price wanted us to pray that police will get there quicker if there's another emergency like Sandy Hook, instead of working on gun legislation and working on mental health legislation. And there's a whole series of things that he goes through and telling people to pray for it. So part of the harm of this, when they say what's the matter with a National Day of Prayer, is if we're getting into the mindset that never mind taking real substantive action, just pray for whatever it is you need and then go about your life.
Right, which in a way you could say it kind of prevents any substantive action from happening. They've done their part, they walk away, and they've not really done anything. Right. So, so the question it begs is, what is the harm? Well, it's just the denial of separation and the entitled feeling, I guess, that a lot of these groups have, that they don't have to play by the same rules. They can just deny and ignore the separation of church and state, use government facilities, and this is what the problem is. They keep making a point of marking territory, I guess you could say, kind of the way a dog does. They get on the property and they make it their own. It blurs the distinction between government and religion and gives the impression that it's okay, that there's no problem, that religion is part of what government does. And that can be a very slippery slope. And history provides lessons on that too. The extreme example is, of course, the Inquisition. And, I just don't even want to get started back down that path.
It's funny when you talk about slippery slopes, the religious right is very quick. If you allow a gay person in the Boy Scouts, all these horrible things are going to happen. It's going to change the morality of the nation. And this is we need to teach people that the Bible proves that homosexuality is wrong. The slippery slopes that they are eager to see there, they don't see that if you start having religious things on government property that touches upon separation of church and state. It's Al Gore had a book years ago about the assault on reason. And as soon as you start taking these non sequiturs of logic, it's like, okay, we're going to have prayer on government property, but the prayer is secular, or the cross is secular. You divorce reason from the way we act, and we're really left with a mess.
Right. Another way that we're pushing back too, in Florida, there are groups that are very big on handing out Bibles at schools. This last week, Dave Silverman and some other people, Dave Silverman, who's the president of American Atheists, and some people in Florida went to a public school in Orlando where a group has been handing out Bibles. And they went down to hand out atheist literature. And basically the schools, based on a Supreme Court ruling, I can't remember the name of it, basically said, if you let one group in, you got to let every group in. And the Christian groups have been taking full advantage of this, especially the
Good News Club.
The Good News Club, exactly. But other groups all over the country, just doing Bible handouts and just doing naked, open proselytization on schools. They've always thought that the schools were appropriate recruitment territory for the local ministries.
And it's funny, I imagine if you look at the atheist propaganda, it's probably just saying, hey kids, you need to really pay attention to history and to science and to logic. It's not like we have a gospel of atheism. You just want them to be kind of skeptical thinkers and don't take things on faith, think it through.
Yeah, and of course the harm that this does in schools is, and the success they're having, the religious right is having, is damage to science curricula. Teaching of creationism, and they would like to just supplant the teaching of evolution, call that religion, and supplant it with the teaching of creationism and call that science. So it's Orwellian, its logic stood on its head. Let me say this about American Atheists and public schools. Dave Silverman, who's a great president for American Atheists. This is American Atheists' 50th year in operation, and it started in '63 with the landmark Supreme Court case Murray v. Curlett, which happened the same day as another case, Abington v. Shemp. Murray v. Curlett removed prayer from the public schools. Shemp removed Bible reading the same day. So they shut that all down, and that's 50 years they've been in operation. So we're, and now in the last 20 years, really, the atheist movement, because of the internet, has really taken off. And in the last 10 years, we're starting to finally push back hard against these groups who are doing the Bible handouts and the prayer meetings in government facilities and the marathon Bible readings.
Yeah, it's funny or not funny, it's sad to see how far back we've kind of fallen in some ways, that, we'd really gotten to a point where skepticism was a good thing in America and just having a logical approach was good in the, the late 1800s and early 1900s with, Ingersoll and that whole era. And I don't think they really foresaw that the religious right back in the 70s would suddenly take hold and catch on as a real phenomena and change the course of history for America and for the world.
Well, Ronald Reagan gave the Christian Coalition keys to the White House, and it's been kind of downhill ever since. And they're actually having some success, with kind of normalizing the teaching of creationism. I think what we need to do is just continue teaching the facts and delineate what is science and what isn't. But in the long run, we've got to make it just embarrassing to be a creationist. Kind of like now, it's gotten to be really embarrassing to be a homophobe anymore. A lot of people haven't caught up yet, but there's just been a drastic change just in the last 2 years. And we've just got to make it where somebody's just too humiliated to admit that they don't know the science and call themselves a creationist.
Right, and not just anybody. We're talking about high people up, running our political institutions.
Right.
And yeah, when Reagan, so you can't endorse me, but I sure endorse you. We kind of should have seen that as a warning where it was heading. And when you're looking for harm, look at George Bush. Look at the horrific things that happened to the world. And for all the kind of moderate liberal people out there, you have to take this for real. So it shouldn't just be a bunch of atheists that are worried, that if people believe in God, it's leading to problems. That's not what it is. It's that when religious people take over the government, we go to wars that we shouldn't go to. We don't educate people. There's all sorts of terrible things that stem from it.
Well, including anti-intellectualism and embargoing information, embargoing facts, and denying facts, which is, what the creationist side does. If a fact doesn't work for them, they just straight up deny it, make up new facts.
It's not only intellectually dishonest, but just the moral repugnance, like when we don't let people in Africa get access to condoms to help minimize AIDS. Where is God's stance on that? I mean, that's horrific.
Right. I think we're just about out of time. Look us up on Facebook. Like us there. All our episodes are on YouTube, and more episodes coming. So see you next time.